Should bureaucrats implement rules and regulations that are not delegated by Congress?
It's not the bureaucrats that do it. It would be
The
an
agencies,
agency.
the bureaucrats working in the agencies, should they be in charge of enforcing rules and regulations not delegated to them by Congress?
No, and that does not occur.
Well, Ms. Katzen, you stated while some elected officials accuse the agencies of running amok, no agency is a free agent, and they can only do which Congress has delegated them.
Correct.
Now, I agree with that. However, we see in agencies all the time rules and regulations that are enforced on the American people that were not delegated to them by Congress. For instance, just in the last 5 years, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has changed its long-standing positions on firearm products 3 times through administrative fiat. Would you agree with that process in the ATF?
I have no quarrel with what the ATF has done because in each
But you said here that they can only
do
do which Congress has delegated to them. So now these changes have resulted in products that were previously classified as lawful by the ATF. Now they're being considered illegal or regulated under the National Firearms Act. And more recently, we've seen with the ATF's rule to categorize pistol braces, these stabilizing braces, as heavily regulated short-barreled rifles, essentially making homeowners, gun owners, nearly obtaining maybe 40 million firearms with stabilizing braces, criminals overnight, felons even. And so, Ms. Katzen, would you say that this is an abuse of that separation of power? Because that rule is not something that Congress has delegated, but the ATF has taken it upon itself to regulate this rule that they created to make millions of Americans felons.
With respect, I was trying to answer your question before you interrupted me to say that the ATF had in each of these instances sufficient statutory authority from Congress and that any challenges to that—
Ms. Katzen, it is my time. So Congress never authorized the ATF to ban pistol braces. Congress never authorized the ATF to do that, to make millions of Americans felons overnight. And so I would go back to your statement that you said in your testimony that these agencies are not free agencies and they can only do which Congress has delegated to them to do.
Congress is not
Ms. Katzen,
specific. Excuse me.
Thank you. My time. No, ma'am. It's my time. Thank you.
Oh, I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Katzen,
So you are not
in
interested in my views.
It is my time. Thank you.
I'm
In your
sorry
testimony,
you're not interested in my
you
views.
stated Congress delegates, but then some officials are quick to condemn the agencies for doing what they are told to do, carrying out the law. Well, last year, the Biden administration's EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers attempted to regulate wetlands and ditches under the Clean Water Act. That's clearly not the intent of the Clean Water Act. The intent of the Clean Water Act was to manage major federal navigable waters. So now this rule was recently upended by the Supreme Court's recent decision. Now, would you agree that the Biden administration has a pattern of purposefully misinterpreting the law in order to carry out their political agenda?
No, ma'am. I think, in fact, that the law keeps changing, and the Supreme Court had a very hard time
I haven't seen that law change
figure out—
here in Congress. So this was the intent of the Clean Water Act, and I have not seen that change. So I would say that this is another example of the Biden administration and the EPA misinterpreting the law to carry out their own political agenda. Now, Ms. Katzen, when discussing regulations made by the Biden administration in your testimony, you also state, are these regulations detrimental to our well-being? Hardly. Are they tying us up in red tape? Certainly not. Well, going back to WOTUS and the Sackett family, who this Clean Water Act decision impacted, the family was threatened with fines of $10,000 per day, had their property misclassified as a wetland, and were prevented from building their family home. it may not be a $2.5 million home like yours, but that sounds like a lot of red tape to me.
Excuse
Do
me,
you
I
disagree?
really take that as a personal
do you
assumption.
disagree?
My home.
Do you disagree that this was an overreach?
I disagree that
Ms.
you're
Katzen, my time
casting
has expired.
aspersions on
Mr. Chairman, I
me
yield.
or my.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we just ask all of our good members to respect the civility and decorum and the integrity of the witnesses who've come forward at their own expense to testify before us today? An insult is not a substitute for an argument. Yield back to
The
you.
chair would advise the members to adhere to the House standard of decorum and proceed in order.